Have you ever had that moment when life throws you a curveball so perfect you can't help but swing? That's exactly what happened to Mark Jensen, a single dad who never expected his simple act of kindness to change everything. If you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button and subscribe for more heartwarming content that reminds us all that love can find us in the most unexpected places. Mark stared at his phone screen, reading his boss's text message for the 5th time. "Why don't you just take me out instead?" The words seemed to hover there, challenging everything about their professional relationship. His thumb hovered over the keyboard as he tried to formulate a response that wouldn't jeopardize his job or the fragile stability he'd built for himself and his daughter. How had a simple favor turned into this complicated situation? 3 weeks earlier, Mark had been working late at Reynolds Architecture, hunched over blueprints for a downtown renovation project. The office had emptied hours ago, leaving only the soft hum of the air conditioning and the occasional ping of his email. He hadn't noticed Eliza Reynolds, the firm's founder and his direct supervisor, standing in his doorway until she cleared her throat. "You're burning the midnight oil again, Jensen," she said, her voice carrying that familiar blend of authority and warmth that had earned her the respect of everyone at the firm. Mark looked up, blinking away the fatigue. "Just trying to get ahead on the Westfield project. The client moved up the deadline." Eliza nodded, stepping into his office. She was wearing her usual impeccable business attire, a tailored navy suit that somehow never seemed to wrinkle, even after 14-hour days. But there was something different about her tonight. A vulnerability in her eyes that he'd never seen before. "Can I ask you something personal?" she said, settling into the chair across from his desk. Mark set down his pencil, surprised. In the 2 years he'd worked for her, their conversations had rarely ventured beyond architecture and occasional small talk about his 8-year-old daughter, Lily. "Of course. You're a single parent, right?" When he nodded, she continued, "How do you meet people? You know, romantically?" The question caught him completely off guard. Eliza Reynolds was 38, brilliant, successful, and by any objective standard, beautiful. The idea that she would have trouble meeting someone seemed absurd. "I don't really," he admitted with an awkward laugh. "Between work and Lily, there's not much time for dating." "That's exactly my problem," she said, running a hand through her dark hair. "My sister keeps telling me I need to put myself out there, whatever that means. She set up a dating profile for me, but I have no idea what I'm doing." Mark couldn't help but smile. It was strangely comforting to know that even someone as accomplished as Eliza struggled with the same ordinary human problems as everyone else. "I've dabbled in the apps," he offered. "Not very successfully, but I could help you navigate the basics if you want." The relief on her face was immediate and genuine. "Would you? God, that would be amazing. I feel like I'm back in high school, completely clueless about how to talk to boys." And that was how Mark Jensen, 34-year-old widower and father, found himself helping his boss create a dating profile on a Friday night, both of them huddled over her phone in the empty office kitchen, a half-empty pizza box between them. "No, definitely not that picture," he said, swiping past a formal headshot that looked like it belonged on the company website. "You want something that shows who you are outside of work." Eliza scrolled through her photo gallery. "I don't take many personal photos." "What about this one?" Mark pointed to a picture of her laughing on what looked like a hiking trail, sunlight filtering through trees behind her. "My brother's wedding last year. We all went hiking the day before." She studied the photo critically. "Do I look okay?" "You look happy," Mark said simply. "That's what matters." As they worked through her profile, selecting photos and crafting responses to prompts, Mark began to see a side of Eliza he'd never known existed. She wasn't just the brilliant architect who could silence a room of contractors with a raised eyebrow. She was also a woman who loved old jazz records, had a weakness for cheesy sci-fi movies, and volunteered at an animal shelter on Sundays. "What should I put for what I'm looking for?" she asked, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Mark considered this. The truth. What do you actually want? Eliza set the phone down, her expression thoughtful. Someone kind. Intelligent. Someone who understands that my work is important to me, but who'll remind me there's a world outside the office. She paused. Someone who makes me laugh. Mark nodded, ignoring the strange flutter in his chest. Right, exactly that. By the time they finished, it was nearly midnight. Mark gathered his things, thinking about the babysitter he needed to relieve and the stack of bills waiting at home. Thank you for this, Eliza said as they walked to the parking garage. I know it's not in your job description. Happy to help, he replied, and he meant it. Despite the unusual circumstances, he'd enjoyed the evening. It had been a long time since he'd spent hours just talking with another adult. Let me know if you get any good matches, he added with a smile. I will, she promised. Good night, Mark. The following Monday, Mark was deep in concentration when Eliza appeared at his door again, this time with 2 coffee cups in hand. I brought reinforcements, she said, placing one on his desk. Got a minute? Always, he replied, grateful for the caffeine. How's the dating profile working out? Eliza made a face. That's what I wanted to talk to you about. I've gotten several messages, but I'm not sure how to respond without sounding. I don't know, stiff? Corporate? Mark couldn't help but laugh. Just be yourself. That's the problem. I don't know who myself is in this context. I've been Eliza Reynolds, CEO and principal architect, for so long that I'm not sure I remember how to be just Eliza. There was something so honest about her admission that Mark felt a surge of empathy. After his wife died 3 years ago, he'd struggled with the same identity crisis. Who was he, if not one half of a partnership? Show me the messages, he offered. And so began a new routine. Every few days, Eliza would stop by his office with coffee and her phone, and they'd spend 15 minutes going through her dating app messages. Mark would help her craft responses that were professional but warm, interested but not desperate. It was during one of these sessions that Mark first noticed how her eyes crinkled at the corners when she really laughed, or how she had a habit of twisting her watch when she was thinking. Small details that seemed insignificant but somehow stuck in his mind during long evenings at home. This guy seems promising, Mark said one afternoon, reading a message from a pediatric surgeon named David. He's asking thoughtful questions, not just commenting on your appearance. Eliza peered over his shoulder, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something subtle and slightly spicy. You think I should meet him? That's the whole point of this, isn't it? Mark said, ignoring the inexplicable tightness in his chest. She nodded slowly. I guess it is. The following week, Eliza was unusually quiet. When Mark asked about her date with the surgeon, she shrugged and changed the subject. It wasn't until Friday, when they were both working late again, that she brought it up. The date was fine, she said, leaning against his doorframe. He was nice. Intelligent. Exactly what I said I wanted. But? Mark prompted, recognizing the hesitation in her voice. But there was no spark, I guess. No moment where I felt like I wanted to know everything about him. She sighed. Maybe I've been alone too long. Maybe I don't know how to connect anymore. Or maybe he just wasn't the right person, Mark suggested. One mediocre date doesn't mean you're broken, Eliza. She smiled at that, a small, grateful smile that made something shift in the air between them. You're good at this, you know. Giving advice. Listening. Why aren't you out there dating? The question caught him off guard. I told you. Work, Lily. It's complicated. Life is complicated for everyone, she said softly. That doesn't mean we stop trying. Before he could respond, her phone rang, a client calling from the West Coast. The moment passed, but Mark found himself thinking about her words as he drove home that night, his daughter sleeping in the back seat after he'd picked her up from the babysitter. Was he using Lily as an excuse? Had he been hiding behind his responsibilities, afraid to risk his heart again? The next few weeks brought a flurry of activity at the firm. A major project was approaching deadline, and everyone was working overtime. Mark saw less of Eliza, their coffee chats replaced by hurried meetings about structural specifications and material costs. It was during this busy period that Lily got sick, nothing serious, just a bad cold, but enough that Mark needed to stay home with her for 2 days. He worked remotely, sending emails between making soup and checking his daughter's temperature. On the second afternoon, his doorbell rang. When he opened it, he found Eliza standing there, holding a paper bag. "I brought chicken soup," she said, looking almost embarrassed. "My grandmother's recipe. It always made me feel better when I was sick." Mark stood frozen for a moment, unable to process the sight of his boss on his doorstep, in jeans and a sweater instead of her usual business attire. "I should have called first," she said, misinterpreting his silence. "I'm sorry, I just—" "No, please, come in," he said quickly, stepping aside. "I'm just surprised to see you." His house was modest, a small 3-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood, nothing like the sleek downtown condo he imagined Eliza lived in. But as she stepped inside, looking around with genuine interest rather than judgment, he felt a strange pride in the home he'd created for himself and Lily. "Where's the patient?" Eliza asked. "Living room. She's camped out watching movies." Lily looked up as they entered, her eyes widening at the sight of the visitor. Despite her runny nose and tousled hair, she immediately sat up straighter. "Your dad's boss," she said. "I saw your picture in the magazine." Eliza smiled, setting the soup on the coffee table. "And you're Lily. Your dad talks about you all the time." "He talks about you too," Lily said with the unfiltered honesty of children. "He says you're the smartest person he's ever met." Mark felt heat rise to his face. "Lily. It's true," his daughter insisted. "You said Ms. Reynolds could design a whole city if she wanted to." Eliza laughed, a genuine sound that filled the small room. "That might be an exaggeration, but thank you. And please, call me Eliza." She stayed for an hour, sitting cross-legged on the floor while Lily explained the plot of the animated movie she was watching. Mark watched them, something warm and dangerous unfurling in his chest as Eliza listened to his daughter with the same focused attention she gave to clients and colleagues. When she finally stood to leave, Mark walked her to the door. "Thank you for the soup," he said. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to," she replied simply. Then, with a slight hesitation, "I've missed our talks." "Me too," he admitted. After she left, Mark returned to the living room to find Lily watching him with a thoughtful expression. "I like her," his daughter declared. "She doesn't talk to me like I'm a baby." "She's a good person," Mark agreed. "Is she your girlfriend?" The question made him choke on air. "What? No. She's my boss, Lily." His daughter shrugged, turning back to her movie. "That's too bad. She looks at you the way Sophia's mom looks at her new husband." Mark dismissed the comment as the imagination of an 8-year-old, but he couldn't quite forget it. Especially when, a week later, Eliza asked for his help again, this time to review messages from a new batch of potential dates. "This one seems interesting," he said, pointing to a message from an environmental lawyer. "He's passionate about his work, like you." Eliza nodded, but there was a distracted quality to her response. After a moment, she took her phone back, staring at the screen before abruptly turning it off. "Can I ask you something, Mark?" "Of course." "Why are you helping me with this?" "Really?" The question surprised him. "Because you asked me to. Because I want you to be happy." She studied him, her gaze more intense than he'd ever seen it. "And what about you? What would make you happy?" The air between them seemed to thicken. Mark was acutely aware of how close they were sitting, of the fact that they were alone in the office kitchen after hours. "I haven't thought about that in a long time," he admitted. "Maybe you should," she said softly. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken possibilities. Then Eliza's phone buzzed with an email notification, breaking the spell. "I should go," she said, standing quickly. "Early meeting tomorrow." Mark nodded, unable to shake the feeling that something significant had just happened, even if he couldn't quite name it. The next day, Eliza was professional and distant, focused entirely on work. Mark told himself it was for the best. Whatever had passed between them was inappropriate. She was his boss, and he had Lily to think about. Complications were the last thing either of them needed. But that evening, as he was putting the finishing touches on a presentation, his phone pinged with a text from Eliza. "I've been thinking about our conversation. About what would make me happy. I don't think it's going to be found on a dating app." Before he could respond, another message appeared. "Why don't you just take me out instead?" Mark stared at the words, his heart pounding. This was crossing a line they couldn't uncross. It could jeopardize his job, her reputation, the comfortable life he'd built for Lily. But as he sat there, phone in hand, he realized something important. He was tired of playing it safe. Since losing his wife, he'd constructed a careful, controlled existence that protected him from pain but also kept him from truly living. With trembling fingers, he typed his response. "When and where?" Her reply came instantly, "Tomorrow night. 7 p.m. I'll send you the address." The next 24 hours passed in a blur of nervous energy. Mark arranged for his regular babysitter to stay with Lily, changed his shirt 3 times, and nearly called the whole thing off twice. But at exactly 7 p.m., he found himself standing outside a small jazz club in a part of the city he rarely visited. Eliza was waiting outside, wearing a simple black dress instead of her usual business attire. Her hair was down, falling in soft waves around her shoulders. She looked beautiful, but more importantly, she looked like herself, not the CEO, not his boss, just Eliza. "Hi," she said, a hint of nervousness in her voice that somehow calmed his own anxiety. "Thanks for coming." "Thanks for asking," he replied. The club was intimate and dimly lit, with a small stage where a quartet played classic jazz standards. They were seated at a corner table, close enough that their knees occasionally brushed under the small table. "I come here sometimes when I need to remember there's more to life than blueprints and client meetings," Eliza explained as a waiter brought them drinks. "My father used to play saxophone in a band like this when I was growing up." "I didn't know that," Mark said, realizing how little he actually knew about her personal life despite all their recent conversations. "There's a lot we don't know about each other," she replied, meeting his gaze directly. "I'd like to change that." And so they talked, really talked, as the music played around them. Mark told her about meeting his wife in college, about the devastating cancer diagnosis that had taken her just 5 years later, about his struggle to be both mother and father to Lily. Eliza shared stories of growing up with a musician father and an engineer mother, of fighting to be taken seriously in a male-dominated field, of building her firm from nothing after being passed over for partnership at her previous job. "I've dated," she admitted as the evening progressed. "But it never seems to work. Men are either intimidated by my success or they see me as some kind of trophy, the powerful career woman they can conquer." "Their loss," Mark said simply. She smiled, reaching across the table to touch his hand. "When you were helping me with those dating profiles, I kept comparing every man who messaged me to you. They all fell short." The confession hung between them, honest and vulnerable. Mark turned his hand over, interlacing his fingers with hers. "I kept telling myself I was just being a good employee. A friend. But every time you matched with someone, I felt disappointed. So what do we do now?" Eliza asked, her voice soft but steady. "This isn't simple. I'm still your boss. Nothing worth having is ever simple, Mark replied. But I think we owe it to ourselves to find out if this could be something real. When he walked her to her car later that night, the air between them was charged with possibility. Standing in the soft glow of a streetlight, Eliza looked up at him with a question in her eyes. Mark answered by leaning down and kissing her, gently at first, then with growing certainty as she responded, her hands coming up to rest against his chest. "I've wanted to do that for weeks," he admitted when they finally pulled apart. "Me too," she whispered. The drive home was a blur, his mind racing with thoughts of Eliza and concerns about what this meant for his job, for Lily, for the careful life he'd constructed. But beneath the worry was something he hadn't felt in years: hope. The following weeks brought new challenges as they navigated the complicated terrain of their evolving relationship. At work, they maintained strict professionalism, with only lingering glances and brief touches in empty hallways betraying the change between them. After hours was different: dinners at quiet restaurants, long walks through the city, and increasingly, evenings at Mark's house where Eliza and Lily bonded over board games and baking experiments. "Are you and Dad boyfriend and girlfriend now?" Lily asked one night as Eliza helped her with homework. Eliza glanced at Mark, who was pretending to be absorbed in cooking dinner but was clearly listening for her answer. "We're figuring things out," she said carefully. "Is that okay with you?" Lily considered this with the serious expression she reserved for important decisions. "Yes," she finally declared. "But you have to promise not to make Dad sad." "I promise to try my very best," Eliza replied, equally serious. Not everyone was as accepting as Lily. When rumors began circulating at the office, Mark overheard whispers questioning his recent promotion to project manager. Had he earned it, or was it because he was sleeping with the boss? The comments stung, undermining his confidence in his professional abilities. One evening, after a particularly difficult day, he brought it up to Eliza as they sat on his back porch, watching the sunset. "People are talking," he said. "About us. About my promotion." Eliza's expression hardened. "You earned that promotion long before anything happened between us. Your work on the Westfield project alone." "I know that," he interrupted. "And you know that. But perception matters in our industry. I don't want your reputation damaged because of me." "My reputation can withstand a few rumors," she said firmly. "But if you're having second thoughts—" "I'm not," he assured her quickly. I need to know that what we're building is strong enough to withstand the complications." Eliza was quiet for a long moment, watching the fading light paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "When my father died," she finally said, "my mother told me something I've never forgotten. She said that life offers us very few chances at real happiness, and only fools pass them up out of fear." She turned to face him, her expression open and vulnerable in a way he'd never seen before their relationship began. "I'm not afraid of complications, Mark. I'm afraid of missing out on something extraordinary because it's not convenient or easy." Her words settled something in him, a restlessness that had been growing alongside his feelings for her. "I'm not afraid either," he realized. "Not anymore." The solution they eventually reached was pragmatic. Mark would transfer to the firm's new residential division, reporting to a different partner. The move was a lateral one professionally, but it removed the direct reporting relationship that had caused the most concern. 6 months after their first date at the jazz club, Mark and Eliza had settled into a rhythm that worked for them. They were still careful at industry events, maintaining appropriate professional boundaries, but they no longer hid their relationship from colleagues or friends. It was on a crisp autumn evening, almost a year after Eliza had first asked for help with her dating profile, that Mark planned a special dinner at home. Lily was spending the night with a friend, giving them rare privacy. "Something smells amazing," Eliza said as she entered, hanging her coat by the door with the familiarity of someone who belonged there. "My mother's lasagna recipe," Mark replied, accepting her hello kiss. "The one food I can actually cook well." They ate by candlelight, talking about their days and upcoming projects. As Mark cleared the plates, he felt a nervous energy building inside him. He'd been planning this moment for weeks, but now that it was here, words seemed inadequate. "Is everything okay?" Eliza asked, noticing his distraction. "You seem tense." Mark set down the dishes and took her hand, leading her to the living room sofa. "I've been thinking a lot about the past year," he began. "About how one simple request to help with a dating profile changed everything." Eliza smiled, squeezing his hand. "Best dating advice I ever got." "I never expected this," he continued. "After Sarah died, I thought that part of my life was over. I had Lily, I had my work, and I told myself that was enough. And now?" Eliza prompted softly. Mark reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. "Now I know it wasn't. You and Lily are the best parts of my life, and I want to build a future with both of you." He opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant diamond ring. "I'm not asking you to be my boss anymore," he said with a smile. "I'm asking you to be my partner. My wife. Lily's stepmother. Whatever complications come with that, we'll figure them out together." Tears filled Eliza's eyes as she looked from the ring to his face. "Are you sure? This is a big step." "I've never been more sure of anything," he said. "I love you, Eliza. Will you marry me?" "Yes," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, absolutely yes." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Mark thought about the winding path that had led them here, from professional colleagues to friends to lovers to family. None of it had been simple or straightforward, but every complicated step had been worth it. The next morning, they told Lily together. Her response was a squeal of delight followed by a barrage of questions about the wedding, whether she could be a bridesmaid, and if Eliza would be living with them now. "We'll figure all that out together," Eliza promised, her arm around Lily's shoulders. "The three of us." 6 months later, they were married in a small ceremony in the botanical gardens, with Lily serving as both flower girl and best daughter. As they exchanged vows under a canopy of flowering trees, Mark caught Eliza's eye and saw in her smile the same wonder he felt, that something so beautiful could grow from such an unexpected beginning. At the reception, Eliza's sister approached them, champagne in hand. "I have to say," she admitted with a laugh, "when I suggested you try online dating, I never expected this outcome." "Sometimes the right person is already in your life," Eliza replied, leaning into Mark's embrace. "You just need a reason to see them differently." Later that night, as they shared their first dance as husband and wife, Mark whispered in her ear, "Thank you for asking me to help with your dating profile." Eliza laughed, the sound as warm and bright as it had been the first time he'd truly heard it. "Thank you for being terrible at giving dating advice." "What do you mean?" "My advice was excellent. You told me to be myself and look for someone kind who made me laugh and understood my passion for work," she reminded him. "I followed your advice perfectly. I just skipped the middleman and chose you." As the music played around them, Mark reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From single dad to husband again. From employee to partner in every sense of the word. From a life of careful boundaries to one of joyful possibility. "I love you," he said simply. "I love you too," she replied. "And I'm so glad I never had to go on another awkward first date." "Me too," he agreed. "Though technically, I should be thanking all those men who messaged you and couldn't measure up." "No," Eliza said, her eyes shining with happiness and certainty. "They never had a chance. Not once. I realized what was right in front of me all along." And that's how a simple favor, helping set up a dating profile, led to a love story that neither Mark nor Eliza could have anticipated. Sometimes the perfect match isn't found through carefully crafted algorithms or swiping right on strangers. Sometimes it's the person you see every day, whose kindness and strength you've witnessed, whose laughter brightens even the most ordinary moments. Asterisk if this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe for more content that celebrates the unexpected ways love finds us. Remember that happiness often arrives in packages we never thought to look for, and sometimes, the best relationships begin with the courage to say, "Why don't you just take me out instead?" Asterisk.